Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined fresh-faced from last night's footballing feast at St Andrews, the 2-2 draw with Sheffield Wednesday, by my colleague and co-host Alex Dicken. How are you, Alex?
I'm good, Brian. It sounds like a thriller when you put it like that, doesn't it?
It was quite eventful. I don't know if we can chalk it up as a legendary thriller, but there was certainly loads to talk about, right from Chris Davies getting a bit of the boo treatment to Damari Gray's equaliser to Aaron Cashin's performance. There's plenty to deep dive on. Just to lay the table a little bit, Alex and I are going to pick through the bones of the 2-2 draw against Sheffield Wednesday. Alex will then speak to Rich Fay. Which podcast? I should know this, Alex, shouldn't I?
The Rob Ryan Red podcast. To
preview the Friday night's game against Wrexham, and then Alex and I will come back and we will chat about the trip to North Wales for what, at the moment, after last night's, feels like a very, very, very difficult game, doesn't it? A trial by air. So, Alex, should we start with last night? What's your first takeaway from what we saw last night?
Oh, my first takeaway, that's a good question. I think that my first takeaway would be that Blues are making many of their own problems at the moment. In terms of the performance for the first 35, 40 minutes, Blues are actually on top and playing reasonably well. They weren't playing, setting the place alight, but they were playing good football. They were working through the thirds well. They were creating these decent openings, and then a mistake happened, a really, really bad mistake. 2 mistakes from Aaron Cashin, which allowed Jamal Lowe to get through on goal, and then Ryan also probably has to do better with the shot as well. So a really, really poor goal to concede, and that just kind of set the tone for what followed, really. I mean, you had maybe 30 of the next 45 minutes in the second half that were just very passive, and it looked like it was going to be one of those nights, especially when Sheffield Wednesday got the second goal, again from a set piece. Blues 2-1 down, then it really was kitchen sink time. Everything kind of went out the window in terms of tactical setup and formation, and Ryan Allsop went up front for the majority of stoppage time, and Blues eventually got the goal that they probably deserved on the balance of play, through Damari Gray, and a really, really good finish, to be fair to him. He's not done an awful lot in September, but that was a really big moment.
Yeah, it was indeed a real good piece of skill as well, because the ball was actually quite high. It sat up quite high, didn't it, for him to sort of execute that finish just off the underside of the bar and not balloon it over the bar. Would have been very easy to have done that. So yeah, it was. Chris Davies spoke about it afterwards, didn't he, as being the type of contribution that you expect from a player who's played so many Premier League games with such technical quality. My main takeaway is thank goodness for that moment of quality, because I think had the final whistle blown and Blues had still been 2-1 down, I think the boos that we heard, which we'll come on to, when Chris Davies made 2 of his 3 substitutions, I think they would have been doubled, with had they lost that game. So, I think, let's not say it papers over the cracks or fall into the trap of saying, it doesn't. The game doesn't bear further analysis because it was a 2-2 draw, because it certainly does. But I do think, it sort of just diffused the tension quite a bit in that was building up last night, and there was frustration.
I think I agree, Brian. I mean, we all turned up expecting Blues to win that game. Obviously, it's not that easy. But if you look at that Sheffield Wednesday 11, their financial problems are well documented over the summer. They've barely been able to sign a player, and the 11 they put out on the night is the 11 that Henrik Pedersen has been flogging in the Championship and has been doing, to be fair, to its credit, quite well. But would any of those players get into many other Championship 11s? Probably not. Maybe 2 or 3, maybe.
I'd have Ernie Weaver over Aaron Cashin, to be fair.
I suppose that's what happens, isn't it? You find the odd youngster who comes through in these situations and does very well. I mean, he had a fantastic game, to be fair to him, with 2
19 years old.
Blocks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Brown, the striker who came on, scored a goal, has got first team minutes this season. So that's what happens. But Blues have to be beating teams like that if they want to go up this season, which they obviously do, and that's what we're judging them against. They have to beat teams like Sheffield Wednesday at home.
Yeah, so when we were asked for our pre-match predictions, we sort of looked at each other and just went 2-0, didn't we? And you thought it would be a fairly straightforward evening, particularly given, as you said, what had happened in the build-up and the news lines that was coming out in the build-up about the Sheffield Wednesday players not being paid, and maybe they were going to go on strike after this match. And I asked Pedersen about that after the game, and he had nothing but positive words about his players' unity and the way they battled. And he said he wasn't aware that they were going to stop training. So, yeah, overall, I thought Sheffield Wednesday really dug in, but they were limited. Chris Davies felt, and you mentioned there, that Blues were quite comfortable until the Cashin error for the equaliser. And I thought they were as well. And just before we came on here, I was watching the highlights of the game again, just to remind myself. And the commentator said that the Stansfield goal was against the run of play. Now, I thought Blues had real good control before that error, personally.
Yeah, the Stansfield goal definitely wasn't against the run of play. I don't think there was a particularly strong run of play at that point in the game.
No, maybe not. No.
Yeah, again, a very good goal from Stansfield, to be fair, created by his kind of anticipation and desire to force a mistake. It was just a really, really bad error. First, the pass from Cashin, which was, misplaced horribly, comes straight back at Blues. And I'm not sure what he's trying to do in terms of the clearance. He's gone with his left foot there when he really, really has to go with his right foot, or try and clear it a different way, ping it back to Allsop rather than try and do a hook with the left foot. He got himself into a mess, and Lowe's gone 1-on-1 with Allsop, and Allsop probably has to do better as well. But we're going to come on to his performances and that mistake in particular a little bit later on as well. So Cashin has to take the blame, and to be fair, he didn't cover himself in glory for the second goal either.
No, he didn't. The ball came in and he was very passive, wasn't he? Allowing the Sheffield Wednesday attacker to get the first contact. I thought he looked off it from the first couple of minutes. Sheffield Wednesday went down their left, Blues right, and they won a corner, didn't they? And Cashin sort of swept across the 6-yard box and put it out with the wrong foot. And you're thinking, well, that should be going upfield rather than behind for a corner. And then, you bolt on to Coventry's third goal from Saturday when, he obviously let the ball bounce and Ellis Sims got the wrong side of him. And it's difficult to see where we go from here. I've been chatting to our Derby County writer, Lee Curtis, just about Cashin, just to sort of check what Blues have got with him. And I showed Lee the highlights, and he said, I can't repeat what he said, but he said that he never did that at Derby. Bearing in mind he sort of come through at Derby, and in January of 2025 he was sold by Derby to Brighton for sort of 8 or 9 million, and they'd been chasing him for a couple of transfer windows, to be fair. So they do see potential in him. What I've then done is I've had a bit of a deeper dive. He's played in a 2 and had a real solid 2 in the League One promotion campaign alongside Sir Curtis Nelson at Derby. He's played in a 3, obviously on the left of the 3, and done well there. So he's almost unrecognisable from the player that did so well at Pride Park. And just looking through what's happened since he's moved, I think it's only fair to point out that he's played 30 minutes of league football since January, both for Brighton in the Premier League and Blues in the Championship. And he looks to me, and I said this to another journalist last night, defenders, when they're not up and running and they're not in the game rhythm or in a flow, and with games under their belt, they can look like this. And he looks like a player that's low on confidence, and he's sort of second guessing everything he's done at the moment. Now, I said I don't know where we go from here, and when I say that, I mean it because it's difficult to throw him in against Wrexham now, isn't it? In the next game, and then if Jack Robinson.
It's impossible, Brian. I think it's almost impossible.
And if you go with Jack Robinson, then when does Cashin's next opportunity come? This is a player who needs games, and I think he'll improve. I mean, clearly there's a footballer in there. Brighton don't get much wrong, do they, in terms of spotting talent? So clearly there is a footballer in there. There's a footballer that needs game time though, and I just wonder whether Blues can afford to indulge the early struggles for the greater good at the moment, because Blues' own season feels like it's not on a knife edge, but it feels like it's at a formative stage.
Yeah, I think you've got a safer pair of hands there in Jack Robinson, haven't you? A 32-year-old who's been there and done it in the Championship, rather than Cashin, who you can't, as you say, Brian, you can't give him that time to feel his way into this. Blues need results now. By the next international break, they could be 7-8 points off the pace, and they don't want to be in that position, so they need results. And I don't think Chris Davies can indulge Aaron Cashin at this point. I think he has to go with what he trusts and knows, and that is Jack Robinson. And if not that, I think that's probably Phil Neumann, because we didn't see an awful lot wrong from him in those first 5 league games.
Yeah, indeed. The one name doing the rounds on social media last night, and I always hesitate to take too much from social media, but because it was fairly febrile out there in the minutes after the game, was Ben Davies. Obviously Blues, we thought they were trying to get Ben Davies back from Rangers. Clearly it hasn't happened. I mean, were they, Alex? What's your understanding with what happened with Ben Davies?
From my understanding, there was definitely some interest in bringing him back and making that permanent. I don't have the full picture of what happened at Rangers, because he seemed to be injured until he wasn't, and then he was sold to Oxford right at the end of the window, wasn't he? So,
yeah.
Given what Chris Davies also said in leaving the door open to re-signing Ben Davies after they'd signed Aaron Cashin as a second left-footed centre-back, you have to presume at that point it was still on the table, or still in Chris Davies' mind at least, because he could have easily just ruled it out, couldn't he? He's done that with other things in the past.
Yeah,
he could have ruled it out, but he didn't. So whether something's gone on there, and it comes down to Blues and negotiations with Rangers, or whether Ben Davies just wanted something different, or whether he wanted a longer contract or something. There's a lot of things and variables that can go on in a potential transfer, and whether he just thought that if he came back to Blues this time around with Phil Neumann almost a poster boy, having been signed midway through last season, that he wouldn't have been guaranteed the minutes that he wanted. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to ask him about it and how he saw it one day, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? My favourite interviewee from last season. Yeah, it's not been thanked for an interview yet this season. So it would be good to talk to him. And I mentioned Ben Davies not only because he's the obvious player that would have played left side to centre back, but for the fact that he had a stuttering start to his Blues career. It took him time to get into the side. When he did in that Virtue Trophy match with Walsall, you and I were looking at each other going, "What have we got here?" And then he ended up becoming arguably one of the players, not arguably, he was one of the players of the season last year, wasn't he? So it just remains whether Cashin gets that kind of game time. But what I would point out, it was sort of November time last season, before Chris Davies settled on his preferred centre-back pairings, wasn't it? Bielik was in and out, and Davies had a niggle, and I think Clara missed a game here and there as well. So we've been here before, is what I'm saying. Yeah,
I would agree. I mean, he played 3 centre-backs at one stage last season when he moved Bielik over to right back to accommodate Davies. So
yeah,
don't rule that out, to be honest, especially with Wrexham to come on Friday, and we know what aerial bombardment they will bring. So yeah. Brian, one other thing I've wanted to put down, one other individual I wanted to focus on in today's podcast is Ryan Allsop. The goalkeeping situation, was obvious right from the summer, wasn't it? In that Blues signed a Premier League goalkeeper on loan, very highly rated one in James Beadle. We expected, at the time, obviously that player would play. Chris Davies kept faith with Ryan Allsop, rightly so, because he had a tremendous season last year. And just in the last couple of games, things have started to creep in, haven't they? Allsop hasn't made errors before, but you would say that he is partly to blame for that opener that Sheffield Wednesday scored. Is there a question mark there, or by waiting so long to change Bailey Peacock-Farrell last season to give Allsop that chance, has Chris Davies basically kind of said that, it's got to be more than 1 or 2 mistakes. You've got to have a catalogue 3 or 4 before I make the change.
Yeah, the difference with this one is Beadle's obviously on loan, isn't he? And, Blues will have had discussions with Brighton about Beadle's usage. And you wonder, now I don't know, what the terms of the loan are, whether you pay if he doesn't play or pay if he does play or whatever. But yeah, Wrexham away for a goalkeeper change.
Yeah.
Not there yet. It feels like it's something you process during the international break. I should know this. Has Beadle been called up by the 21s?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Well, actually, I don't think anything's been confirmed yet, but he's still their goalkeeper, so I presume he will be. But if you look at one interesting thing that we found was the save percentage of Allsop, and naturally Blues goalkeeper hasn't been worked that much this season in the Championship. I think 19 shots faced and 10 goals conceded. You've obviously got to look deeper into the quality of those finishes, to potentially criticise Allsop or say he could have done better. But a 52% save percentage is one of the lower ones in the Championship. So that's potentially something to keep an eye on as well. But yeah, I agree, but I don't think it's something you do in a hurry with 2 days between games right before an international break, particularly when it's Wrexham away. You know what comes. You don't want to throw a goalkeeper in who hasn't played much football at Wrexham. You want your number one established between the sticks for that one, I think.
Yeah, indeed. Particularly if you're likely to have to change the central centre-back pairing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you put too many changing variables, you really do risk even more confusion, particularly in a setting, as we've already said, where, cohesion is going to be all important because, Wrexham aren't hoofball, but they are one of the more direct teams in the Championship, not as direct as Portsmouth, who are the most direct team in the Championship, I think. But I think they're sort of 5th or 6th in terms of the number of long balls they play in a game. So, yeah, the Allsop situation, for me, he's still got credit in the bank, albeit, the error for the equaliser last night was probably his worst, wasn't it, in a blue shirt, do you think? Or have they been worse?
No, I would say. They haven't many errors, have there, from Ryan Allsop? I can't think of glaring.
Just trying to think out at Coventry, there was a few nervy moments playing out, weren't there? One where he gave the ball straight to a Coventry player. But in terms of shot stopping, it had been pretty good until last night.
Yeah, no, I agree. Set pieces, Brian. It's becoming a running theme, isn't it? To the point where most press conferences we have, Chris Davies, set pieces come up. Another set piece goal that George Brown scored from for Sheffield Wednesday. It was a fairly straightforward one, really, wasn't it? A free kick from the left from Barry Bannon. Goes beyond everyone. Dykes had Brown, or was supposed to be marking Brown, or was near Brown. Brown got away from Dykes, snuck in behind Aaron Cashin, who tried to sweep it behind with his left foot when he probably should have gone with his right and cleared it. And naturally a goal. That's 5 goals conceded from set piece in the league this season, which is the highest. However, it must be said that who scored are counting the goal Abdul Fattah scored against Blues, which came from a throw-in, but there were a lot of things kind of in there after the throw-in was taken. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can strictly have that, but still, if you look at it with four goals conceded in the league from set pieces, there was that one in the cup from Port Vale and a recycled corner as well. It's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Especially going to a team like Wrexham.
Yeah, indeed. And you've said this 100 times, haven't you? It doesn't feel like anyone else is going to win a header other than Clara at the moment. And, even Willemsen was useful at defensive set pieces, wasn't he? And obviously Ben Davies more than held his own last season in that respect. Robinson, he's not the tallest, is he, Robinson? Cashin's not the tallest. Neumann, I think if you want to defend set pieces and an aerial bombardment, then at Wrexham, it just feels like you need someone of Neumann's stature in there, doesn't it? It's too many lost first contacts. And last night's, as you say, was just a case of Cashin going with the wrong foot. I watched Jonathan Grounds obviously comes out to the sort into the technical area when the set pieces are happening, doesn't he? And he just sort of turned on his heel in disgust and I think got back to the bench as quickly as he could last night when that one went in. It is an issue, and as much as Blues are saying, "Oh, we're working on it," you are now, and I'm sure they are. I have absolutely every faith that they're devoting a lot of time to sorting this issue. But what do old pros say about set pieces? It's not. It's organisation, but it's also about a mindset, isn't it? It's about having the dog in you to go and stick your head in and be physical and do the blocks and get off the ground and go where the elbows are flying and all that sort of thing. And I just wonder if Blues have the tools for that, as well. It does feel like Clara is the only head at the moment.
Yeah, this is why when I'm predicting 11s and looking at 11s for games at the moment, I'm trying to get an extra body or two in there that I think that's going to help out on set piece. And I'm sure Chris Davies is probably doing the same, isn't he? But sometimes they just aren't there. If you look at, he could potentially play Neumann, Clara, and Robinson, and Blues might still be susceptible to a set piece against Wrexham because that is still only 3 players, isn't it? And that's probably the most they're going to have. 3 decent-sized players who can defend these situations. They could play Lyndon Dykes and give themselves a 4th. But it's a real issue, and they can't do much because there is just not height in the squad, is there? There's not enough players over 6 foot or near 6 foot, and it's probably going to be an issue throughout the season. As you say, it's probably a case of the dark arts getting involved here and more blocks being made to prevent the big players from other teams getting a run on the ball and winning their headers.
And if, maybe when, there's a real deep dive done in the recruitment that was done in the summer, you just wonder, has Davies been given the right profile across the board? In terms of the physical profile and the height, because it was something that they managed their way through last season, and it's looking more difficult this season.
Yeah, Chris. Well, I put this question to Chris Davies, I think before the Swansea game, about the lack of height, and he said, if you look across the board in the Championship, a lot of teams aren't that big. And to be fair, I would probably disagree on that. I think if you look at Swansea were the next team that Blues faced, weren't they? And Swansea had the 2 centre-backs who were both 6'3", 6'4". Tiemann, the left back, was probably 6 foot. Then you had Stamanic in midfield, who's probably 6'2". Vipotnik up front, 6'1". So big guys right across the field. Obviously, they've got the diminutive players like Blues have as well, but just less of them. And Sheffield Wednesday
they looked a bigger side, didn't they? Yeah,
and that's because that's what they need, isn't it? They've not got the quality to break down Championship teams, so they need to rely on the set piece quality of Barry Bannon and players attacking the ball when it goes into the box. And fair play, work for them. Yeah,
indeed. Do we need to? He's not down on the list, but do we need to talk about Kyogo as well?
It's a bit repetitive, isn't it?
It is. Let's just say, absolutely fantastic without the ball
until he gets it.
The chance he had, who put him through in the second half, and he didn't even get a contact on the ball. Shouldn't anyway. People who watch the game will know that he went through in the second half, sort of just slightly in the inside left channel, and it was a 1-on-1. His movement and his pace took him away from the defender, and then he just waited and waited and waited and waited. And the defender got the toe on, and it just didn't seem to have a picture again of what he was trying to do with the finish, and the chance was gone. It leads us to the question: is do you play him? And obviously when Dutch out, I think you do play him because Dykes again feels like Plan B rather than Plan A, doesn't he? But I mean the lack of assertiveness in front of goal, it's almost like, why are you playing him if he's not even going to get contact on the ball, isn't it?
Yeah, his finishing hasn't looked good. And to be fair, Brian, I would argue with Dykes, maybe Plan B becomes Plan A at the moment. But on Kyogo, I struggle to see how you can play him against Wrexham because one, the height, 2, if he gets the chances at the moment, he's not scoring them. And he's taking up someone else's place in the 11. So, yeah, not for me, not against Wrexham. I've never wanted a player to succeed so much, because you can see kind of everything that he's doing. His work rate's phenomenal. He's a pressing machine. He gets himself into absolutely brilliant positions. If you watch him when Tomoki Iwata and Tommy Doyle have the ball in midfield or Peck, he's constantly on the move, darting in and around the centre-backs and trying to create an angle or create some space to run in behind. A lot of the time they don't pick him out. Maybe that's something that needs work on as well. There's an occasion against Sheffield Wednesday when Stansfield broke through the centre with the ball and in the first half and could have slid Kyogo in. Well, to be fair, another player could have slid Kyogo in. I don't think Stansfield has got the deft pass for that one.
Yeah.
No. So he did it in the end, and he went for a shot that was either wide or blocked, I think. But that's an opportunity there. So, but the problem is, if he keeps missing the chances, it'll probably reach a point where they stop finding him, and then it's at a stage where you've got a real problem, because then you can't start him, can you? And he's an impact sub and nothing more.
We'll talk about whether we'd play him against Wrexham when we come on to that. But I do have thoughts on that. The one thing I was slightly relieved, or very relieved about last night, actually, was Chris Davies' post-match press conference. Now, you and I have spoken about how we were surprised at the line and the narrative he took after the Coventry game, focusing on what to us felt like, I won't put words in your mouth, what to me felt like side issues rather than the fact that his team had been so easily handled and sort of wilted in adversity. And he actually used that phrase last night in his press conference, didn't he, about how they'd come together after the Coventry game and talked about how they were handling adversity. So that was interesting. But he struck the right note last night. And I have no quibbles with what he was, with his answers at all. I think he absolutely hit the nail on the head, and he alighted upon a phrase that had eluded me when I was trying to sum up the game. We shouldn't have allowed the match to become what it became, and that was absolutely the right tone. And you asked him about the response to the Doyle and Roberts substitutions, didn't you? And what did he say to that?
Yeah, so he said those two players are players that haven't played many minutes this season, and it was always pre-planned. He got it written down in his notebook next to him to take them off around the 60-minute mark. So that's why they were taken off. Nothing more, nothing less. It'll be interesting to see if either of those two players or both of them do start against Wrexham on Friday, because that'll kind of give us a better indication as to what he thought of their performances.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearly not one that went. Clearly one that didn't go down well with supporters. And to be fair to him, I thought he handled that question and answered it quite well, being respectful of the fans who've obviously paid their hard-earned money to watch it and have their opinion. But also, explaining that, he's probably got access to the information. Those two players are at risk of injury, and if he carries on playing them and flogging them, that maybe they could, join what has become quite a lengthy injury list. So yeah, I thought it was a fair answer.
It kills the argument dead, doesn't it? If you're saying they only had an hour on them, and we've got data to show that they were entering the red zone or whatever. He didn't actually use that phrase, but he would have known their fatigue levels. It kills the argument dead. And as you say, the tone he struck the answer he gave was exactly right. I think what I was surprised at was the fact that there were so many boos, and the fact that boos came at all. Literally, how many games into the season are we? 9 or 10 games into the season. 9 or 10 games ago, Chris Davies, it was Super Chrissy Davis, Bielik in attack, Bielik at the back, Elfie in attack. And yet within 10 games, his substitutions are being booed. I was surprised. I can't say anything other than that. And I just think, just got to remember that this is a manager managing in the Championship for the first season. And I saw, without being too patronising about it, you did see a development from Saturday's press conference to Tuesday night's press conference, didn't you? So, I think he's got to be able to develop in the way that players have got being given time to develop as well. Yeah,
I think it was obviously just those two players that there's a real clamour from supporters to see them, isn't there? Particularly in the case of Tommy Doyle, in his preferred position as a central deeper midfield player. And Doyle, I thought, was probably having a good influence on the game, which
I do too.
Again doesn't add to the, it only adds to the frustration, doesn't it, of the fans seeing a player like that being taken off. And Roberts, I thought, was very hit and miss first half.
Same.
But actually, second half, first 10, 15 minutes, I thought he was getting more into it and getting involved. And, it probably, had he been taken off at half time, you'd probably be, less frustrated about it than him being taken off when he was taken off. So, Chris Davies has access to the information, so you can't blame him for doing that.
He could have done without Kuma sticking his first cross behind the goal, though, couldn't he? That really didn't help the substitution go down, and then obviously they get their second goal, and it feels like what I was saying earlier about why the mood in here is getting a little bit dark. But yeah, obviously plans B, C, D, E, F through Z came out, didn't they, with Allsop up for set pieces and Clara playing in attack, and a back three of Iwata, Cochrane and Leonard. I don't think you can accuse Davis of having no plan B, because I think he emptied the tactical option book last night.
Yeah, Allsop going up in the first minute of stop.
Yeah, you turned to me and said,
time.
"Yeah, you said to me that's early, isn't it?"
Yeah, I couldn't believe he was there, but yeah, I mean they got away with it because that would have really killed the final 6-7 minute stoppage time. But
how can you imagine if it had been a breakaway goal and it had been 3-1?
Exactly.
Yeah, it would have been, the darkness would have been very, very dark, I think.
Yeah, so fair play. Should we move on to Wrexham?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. So you spoke to Rich Fay from the Rob Ryan Red podcast to get the lowdown on Wrexham, didn't you, Alex? So let's hear from Rich now.
Rich, thanks for joining us today. Wrexham starts the season 9 points in their opening 8 games, marginally worse than where Blues are at this moment in time. How would you assess it?
It's kind of been more of the same from what we've seen from Wrexham in recent years, really. We've had this weird reversal this season where we used to be really good and known for our home form, but we've not got a league win at home this season. We've won the Carabao Cup twice, but we just seem to be better catered to playing away from home. I think the gulf in quality, that step up, has really caught Wrexham by surprise this season. There's an argument that our strongest lineup right now would not have a single starter from the team that got us promoted from League One. It was an extensive summer overhaul, which was required. And I think from maybe a Blues perspective, there'll be that similarity with where they were this time last year, really, with basically a whole new look squad. Our style of play, the manager's not changed whatsoever. But what we're seeing right now is a Wrexham team that hasn't really established itself yet. It still lacks that kind of identity. We don't really know what our best lineup will be when everyone is fully fit. We're sort of easing people into the system, getting new players up to speed, and everything's sort of gelling. And at the moment, I think we've just seen a step up in quality where Wrexham haven't quite been good enough, but also just a work in progress, really. Like I said, the new signings, there is real promise there, and there's real excitement about what this Wrexham team can do. But right now, it's just about steadying the ship, trying to get a run of results together. And like I said, restoring what we had last season, which was being very tight at the back and being very good at home. That's not been the case at all this season. And I think that is primarily just down to personnel gelling in rather than some bigger issue that you might see with these sexy headlines saying is Parky going to get sacked and all that. I think it is just a bedded in process at this moment in time.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether Wrexham have stayed true to Phil Parkinson's style from last season, because I remember that game at the back end of January where Blues were a little bit light, I think, in midfield and the injury front, and had a mix and match 11 that night, and basically just came under aerial bombardment for probably about 65 of those 90 minutes. Are we expecting something similar on Friday? Will Wrexham really put it on Blues?
I'm not sure. We're still not won at home this season, and that is what kind of concerns me. A night under the lights at the racecourse, anything can happen, and we can up our game against sort of better opposition. I would actually say what we've come up unstuck against this season has been teams we perhaps thought we'd do better against. So we drew Sheffield Wednesday, which I'm sure you can relate to. We lost to West Brom. We didn't quite know what type of team they'd be at that moment in time. And we lost to QPR. And maybe on paper, Wrexham fans would have said, oh, we'll win all those or win 2 of those. But that just wasn't the case because we weren't quite sure the calibre of opposition we were up against. And I still think we'll be good against the bigger teams this season, as we always have been under Phil Parkinson, because our style of play is to sit back, stay in shape, frustrate your opposition, and hit them on the counter-attack, really. We're a very quick transitional team. We've obviously added Kiefer Moore to our squad, and he is our outball. He's like a deluxe Ollie Palmer and a Stephen Fletcher. So when we go long, we're probably more effective now than we ever were before. We just maybe still lack that little bit of pace on the counter-attack to actually punish teams who press high. And an issue we've had in a lot of games this season is that the opposition sort of wingers have been able to pin back our wing-backs, and we've not had the outball to then get behind them. So they can go as offensive as they want because they've not really had a fear of being counter-attacked. That's changed since Isa Kabore came in from Man City on loan. He looks a real player. He tormented Leicester City on Tuesday night. He was fantastic away against Norwich. So stylistically, I think we will be similar. The only slight tweak we've had this season is that we have tended in the last maybe 3 games now to we rudimentary of 3-5-2. That's what we were against you twice last season. You dominated midfield in that first game. Like I said, the second game, we were able to match you a little bit. Our midfield now has changed so that it's almost like a box midfield. You've basically got a 2 and then a 2 behind Kiefer Moore. So we tend to sit with Ben Sheaf and George Dobson doing the dirty work in front of the defence. And then behind Kiefer Moore, you play Lewis O'Brien and Josh Windass as sort of 2 attacking midfielders. So that's how we've lined up in the last few games. I'm just wondering if we might revert back to that sort of flat 3 against Blues just to try and win that midfield battle, because the game at your place last season, that was the difference. Absolutely schooled as a midfield. We couldn't get near Pike and Iwata. But I think now we've got Sheaf, got O'Brien, got Dobson in there. I think we could give you a better game in midfield. So it'll be a 3-5-2. It's just whether the midfield is made up of a holding 3 or 2 and a 2.
Yeah, O'Brien can do either of those roles, can't he? Again, an exceptional player for Huddersfield Town at this level 2 or 3 years ago. Ben Sheaf is a midfielder I've always liked in the Championship. Injuries a little bit last season at Coventry, but still a very good player at this level. And Kiefer Moore, Brian and I have spoken about a couple of times on our podcast, saying that we maybe could have looked at him in the summer and he'd been a good option for Blues. Are they the kind of the standout signings? Talk us through Wrexham's summer business. £30 million spent, all around that mark. They were the big spenders in this season's Championship, not Blues. Talk us through the business. Who's come in? Who's impressed you most? And the players that Blues really need to watch out for.
Yeah, like I said, hypothetically, we could have had a strongest 11 this season, which was entirely new players. That would have been Danny Ward in goal, would have been a back 3 of Hyam, Cody and Doyle. Wing backs, you'd have Kabore and Kakache. Kakache, this guy, a New Zealand international we signed from Empoli in Serie A. He's looked really good but been injury prone. The midfield would be Sheaf, Windass and O'Brien, and up front you'd have Broadhead and Kiefer Moore. So that's 11 new signings, and on paper they all seem to be really good for the Championship. It's just trying to adapt them in there. In terms of the standout players, Kiefer Moore, like I said, he is. If Phil Parkinson could create a footballer in the lab, it would be Kiefer Moore. He's like this Frankenstein monster that you want in attack because he does all that dirty work. He's a bit more mobile than what we've had in the past, but he just wins everything. He's fantastic. And the way we play, he either occupies the centre-backs for other people to get the ball, or he can drop deep, bring the wingers into play. He's been a revelation, really. Lewis O'Brien, amazing capture. I think he could be the sort of the best pound-for-pound signing we've had. I know Swansea fans we spoke to said he's sort of top-end Championship already. Some of them maybe would say a lower-end Prem team might take a punt on him, but he just seems really versatile. Again, I think we just need to work out what position we want him in more so. He can play as that sort of 10. He can play box-to-box. He can hold if he has to. The one I've been most impressed with has been Isa Kabore, loanee from Man City, formerly of Luton, just because he is that archetypal sort of wing back who was just so fast and tricky, and he's just a constant outlet. You'll get 70 minutes of him just running, putting brilliant balls into the box. He just looks a step above any quality we've got at wing back. So they're the 3 that have shone the most. Callum Doyle and Connor Cody, we were expecting a lot of. Cody's dropped out of the team. He's not played, I think, the last 3 or 4 games. He was sort of exposed by the system early on, playing alongside Brent and Max Cleworth, 2 centre-backs from last season, who've been with us since League. Max has been with us since National League, and Lewis Brent's been with us since League One. And they were just a bit too inexperienced for the Championship. And Connor Cody was exposed as the guy in the middle three, and he's been dropped. So I wouldn't expect to see him against Blues on Friday night. And Callum Doyle arrived as this revelation. He could be the signing of the summer, but he's been dropped for the last 2 games as well. In the Norwich game, we were 1-0 down at half-time, and he got hooked. Lewis Brunt came on. We won that game 3-2. We've been decent since then as well. So at the moment, like I said, the 3 that have shone the most would be O'Brien, Moore, and Kabore. I'd expect all of them to start against you on a Friday night. The other signings I'd expect to start are Dom Hyam at centre-back, central centre-back, Sam from Blackburn. I think he played every minute in the Championship last season for them, so another really steady capture. Ben Sheaf, like you mentioned, he'll play as well alongside George Dobson, I'd expect, at centre-mid. And the most interesting one, I think, is Nathan Broadhead, because North Walian, it was sort of billed as this homecoming for him, £10 million or something. I think it was 7.5 up front, shattered the club record fee. And to begin with, he's a left winger. He doesn't really fit into this Wrexham team. The last couple of games, he's featured from the bench. He's looked really good as one of the 2 playing off Kiefer Moore. And the dilemma from a Wrexham point of view is, do you play a super sub from the start, or do you keep him as a super sub where he's been doing his damage against Blues? And it's the real sort of question of debate from the Wrexham team news perspective is, do we start Broadhead, who's in fine form, or do you keep him as that super sub to maybe stretch the legs in the last 25, 30 minutes? So I'm fascinated to see what Parky does. I expect he'll basically go and change from Tuesday night, though, from what I've seen.
Yeah, could have some big money players in that bench, to be fair. And Kabore as the right wing back against Alex Cochrane, the Blues left back, he's a very intriguing battle, because Cochrane in the Blues' last 2 away games at Coventry when he came on as a sub, and against Stoke in particular, he's been rinsed by Championship wingers. So that is one to watch, really, as a matchup. Just before I let you go, can you give us a score prediction? I hate doing this, but what would you say? What's your prediction for this one?
I reckon a score draw. I think it'll be similar to the game we saw last year. I think both teams have, like I said, both teams are still trying to establish what their best side is. Like I think your biggest strength's always been midfield, we've said, and we've really improved in midfield again. So I think it'll be the same result as when we played you earlier in the year, but a different match in the sense that I think we'll try and keep the ball on the ground a little bit more, put some dangerous crosses into the box. Like I said, we've not won at home in the league this season, and that is still hanging over us. And that's a big weight to bear for Wrexham, because that has been the backbone of these 3 consecutive promotions. We basically won every game at home, it felt like. And particularly last season, being able to get a point off Birmingham made us realise that we can beat anyone at home, or we can give anyone a game, because they were the best team by a mile last season. So, yeah, I still just think the weight of trying to win at home might weigh too much on us, but I don't expect us to lose. So, yeah, I'm going to go for a score draw.
Good stuff. Thanks to Rich for that. Alex, where are we with Blues injuries at the moment? Because I know there will be a very pressing consideration with what Davis does with his team on Friday night.
Yeah, so the big news after the Sheffield Wednesday game was Chris Davies said that Ethan Laird will be out for a few months with a hamstring issue, obviously quite a significant hamstring problem there, sustained at Coventry and taking a shot. So that's a massive blow, to be honest. Laird has been Blues' best fullback this season, be it a right back or left back, and obviously will present a problem further down the line if he isn't back for when Bright Asai Samuel goes off to the African Cup of Nations in late December or mid to late December over the Christmas period. So yeah, that's a really big blow. Marvin Duksh is out until after the international break. Chris Davies said a few weeks, which could be probably anything from a week to 5 weeks, I'd say. So yeah, he's away and not going to be involved against Wrexham. And then 2 fresh injuries with Asai Samuel and Jay Stansfield both going off with foot injuries against Sheffield Wednesday. Stansfield, both of them actually did try and play on for 5-10 minutes or so before going off. Hopefully, they're both available for the Wrexham game. They didn't look, on the face of it, I don't have access to the scans they're going to have, but they didn't look to be bad ones.
No, as you say, they both tried to play on. Asai Samuel seemed to sort of open up his ankle or do something when he was blocking across, wasn't he? In the second half, and then Jay, did he have his foot trodden on or something like that when he tried to go around the side and went over the byline into the hoardings? And again, he tried to play on. Should we work on the basis that neither are available? So let's do the the worst case scenario in terms of what we're going to do. So Blues will be facing a 3, probably 4-2-1 with a back three of Clywith, Dom High and Lewis Brunt. And then the two sort of number 10s behind Kiefer Moore will be, I think, the excellent Lewis O'Brien, and then teaming up with Josh Windass as well. Lots of mobility there, and Moore, Windass, and O'Brien are basically Wrexham's main goal scorers. So up against a 3-4-2-1, you would expect Blues' default starting formation to still be there 4-2-3-1, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. They're not going to change. I think Chris Davies has made that clear. It's just how that looks. I made the case before the last game to potentially try Phil Neumann at right back and flip the system. I don't know about flip the system as such for this one, but I wouldn't be surprised or against Phil Neumann playing at right back. I don't think Asai Samuel has set the world alight recently. I think his form has dipped since August. So I wouldn't be against Phil Neumann playing at right back to give Blues that extra big body on those set pieces when those crosses come in, which they inevitably will for Kiefer Moore. Gives Clara and Jack Robinson, who I definitely expect to come back in for Aaron Cashin, a little bit of help. Yeah.
The options at right back are obviously Neumann, Alphonse Samsted, and I suppose Tomoki Iwata. If Asai Samuel's out, he finished the Sheffield Wednesday game in that position, didn't he? You'd have to think that somehow Iwata is further up the right back pecking order than Samsted, if Samsted couldn't even get off the bench under those circumstances. Yeah. So it absolutely screams Neumann, particularly given the conversation we've had about the need for physical presence at set pieces. Alex Cochrane, again, maybe having a bit of a struggle at the moment. He's faced Wrexham before, so he'll know what he's up against. And as you say, Clara picks himself, and Robinson comes in for Cashin, and then you're looking at the midfield sort of double pivot. And the fact if Stansfield is out, you're then wondering, well, do they need then to play Tommy Doyle as the 10 with the option of if they need to, they can bring him slightly deeper and play him closer to Pekka Iwata. So it does feel, that the tide is creeping up the Selectoral beach a little bit, isn't it? The water's getting a little bit closer, and the options are sort of reducing with each little injury at the moment. So Pekka Iwata and then Doyle as the 10, and then I suppose the wings, Robertson, Gray, I suppose.
Yeah, unless he does really like the kind of tenacity and intensity of Lewis Koumas, doesn't he? So it wouldn't shock me if Koumas played instead of Roberts.
Yeah.
I think the selection for me, irrespective of whether Stansfield fit to play Doyle as the 10, makes sense. I think it just gives you a little bit more stability and quality and possession in the middle of midfield, and I think Blues will need that for this game.
Yeah, indeed. And if the two previous games against Wrexham told us anything, they are physical battles, aren't they? They really are about winning duels. And I wonder if Patrick Roberts he's small, isn't he? I wonder if he's going to could thrive in that environment, particularly at their place. And whether Davis will be inclined to go for the sort of the slightly bigger to really oversimplify it. But, maybe the greater athleticism of Koumas. And then up front, we said we'd chat about who to play up front. From what obviously Kyogo / Dykes or if Jay's fit, but we said for the purposes of this exercise, we've ruled him out. I can absolutely see why you'd play Lyndon Dykes again because of the defensive set piece situation. However, watching Wrexham, and I've only seen highlights, and a couple of times they've been on TV. The centre backs are vulnerable to quick movement. Look at the Jordan James goal for Leicester on Tuesday night. And it was 2 or 3 passes, some real quick movement from James off the ball, a quick 1-2, and Hyam's out of position and Ben Sheaf's not tracking back. I do think they are vulnerable to speedy forwards. That said, you could just see someone of the stature of Cleworth just eating Kyogo up, couldn't you? So depends which way you want to go. Do you want to sort of have the defensive centre forward, if that makes sense, option of Dykes because of what he gives you in the air, or do you want, so maybe pick someone according to Wrexham's weakness?
Do you match them up and try and battle a little bit more with Lyndon and Dykes and go kind of light for light with Wrexham? Because then you've got 4 players all of a sudden in your 11 who are of good size and you're able to compete on those set pieces, or do you stick to your own playing style and try and play through them with a more diminutive striker in Kyogo? Ordinarily, I'd go for that, but I feel like Blues haven't functioned that well recently, so I'd probably be inclined to play it a little bit more safe and have players who can physically just battle Wrexham, because that's what it's going to be.
If it comes down to that, yeah. And you could also say that if Kyogo does get in behind, is he going to score?
Well, there is always that at the moment, yeah. So that's why I would go for Lyndon Dykes. I actually thought Dykes, although he did partly lose his man for the second Sheffield Wednesday goal, I thought he made a big impact. Yeah. Not necessarily in the quality of his play, but his presence, his physical presence in the box late on as Blues were throwing everything at it and chucking the ball in there, I thought made a big difference. So I would go for him for this game. And obviously he did also score that brilliant goal against Wrexham last time.
An absolute belter, yeah.
They hit 14 of the players on its way in.
And somehow got awarded to him, yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't take it off him. He's the king of important goals, isn't he? So let's not take that one off him.
Yeah, no, I agree. Dykes is the one for me. I don't think there are that many, variables with the rest of the 11. I think a lot of it's going to pick itself. Chris Davies hasn't got an awful lot of options. Just before we finish, Brian, is Kanya Fujimoto going to come into the equation? Do you think at some stage? And what did you think of his? What was it? 2 + 9. 11-minute cameo against Sheffield Wednesday.
I think the only thing I noticed him doing was taking a corner, which was a good corner. To be fair, but Blues didn't get a contact on it, and the keeper took it quite comfortably. But it was in the right area. I mean, that is a big call, isn't it? To throw him straight into it.
Sort of calls we live for, though, isn't it? That
would you put? I mean, that would effectively mean playing him 10 and not playing Tommy Doyle, or then dropping Doyle back and not playing one of Pekka Iwata. If Doyle is only capable of an hour on Tuesday, I wonder, if you really want him scrapping in the midfield engine room on Friday. Not for me. Fujimoto off the bench, I think, and at absolute best, I think.
The one thing I will say about the 10 position is why it probably hasn't suited Doyle is that the number 10 for Blues has to do so much work. Don't they? In terms of kind of running across both lines, keeping up with play, getting back into position, defending, and joining the striker as in what is essentially a 4-4-2 when the team presses. So that is a role which takes an awful lot of running power, which is probably why Jay Stansford has thrived in it most this season. And hopefully he is fit to take his place in the 11. If he is, I think he'll play there. And then obviously 100%. Davies has the decision to make over whether it's Doyle in midfield or Peck. So, I would just face Wrexham up and play at the most physical 11 that Blues can put out, which I think includes Dykes as the 9.
Yeah, indeed. Can't argue with that. Alex, should we wrap it up there?
I think so, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you all for listening. Please do hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And it's a big keep right on from both of us.